of Lady Macbeth is one upon which Shakespeare has bestowed a great deal of care and attention, thereby making it one of the most complex and omnivorous character Shakespeare has ever delineated. According to A.C. Bradley, a critic, Lady Macbeth is curious blending of opposite qualities. Critics are divided at viewing over her real character. Some consider her as thoroughly hateful, invariably savage, and purely demonic and fiend like queen. Fiend का मतलब शैतान, शैतानी queen है. और a fourth witch, बिल्कुल चुड़ैल के जैसी, चौथी फुड चुड़ैल जैसी, who edged her husband to commit the most bloody crime of killing their guest, King Duncan, while others look upon her as a delicate, fragile woman who simply, out of her love for her husband, unsexes herself. अनसेक्स करना मतलब वो वुमन है लेकिन अपने आप को थोड़ी देर के लिए शी becomes manly and changes her volition, her resolution, her determination. So she out of her love she unsexes herself at a critical time, but soon after her womanly nature emerges, comes back, and she collapses under the heavy stress of events which prove too apprehensive for her. To understand her real worth and nature, we may summarize her characteristics in certain points. For example, first of all, we can discuss her under the heading of an ambitious lady who has an iron will. She is ambitious less for herself than for her husband. She wishes to see her husband and on the throne. She wishes her husband to be crowned. She wishes her husband to be the king of Scotland and the crown with golden diadem, and therefore the strength of her affection adds strength to her ambition and plunges with her husband in the depth of guilt to produce all their days and nights sole sovereign sway and masterdom. Her eyes are fixed upon the crown and the means to it. To her, there is no separation between will and deed, and as the deed falls in part to her, she is sure she will be able to do it in the utter frightful lines. Uh, I quote the lines, I have given suck and know how tender it is to love the babe that milks me. I would, while it was smiling in my face, have plucked my nipple from her boneless gums and dashed the brain out, had I sworn as you to this. And that is why Macbeth himself praises and highly esteems her. Bring forth man children only, for thy undaunted mettle should compose nothing but males. In the presence of overwhelming horror and danger in the murder scene and the banquet scene, her self control is perfect. And she is very resourceful. We can discuss her character under the uh, under the title of her resourcefulness. Lady Macbeth is certainly more resourceful than her husband. It is she who takes initiative and plans the murder of King Duncan, and even partly assists Macbeth by shifting the guilt of murder from her husband to the two grooms, attendants, who attend King Duncan. Unlike Macbeth, she does not lose her self-control in the most critical moments too. For example, in murder scene you can see her quite composed, and even in banquet scene, it is she who saves the appearances, who saves Macbeth from being disclosed. Although Macbeth becomes very weak when he sees Banquo's ghost in the scene, she feigns to faint when the murder of Duncan is discovered to divert the attention of the people from her husband, who was somehow unable to hide his uh, pale face. All this shows her highly resourcefulness. But she has done all this because of her deep devotion to her husband only, right? But when the time comes, she is when her husband has become uh, successful in killing the hurdles like King Duncan and Banquo, and after killing Macduff's children, he becomes autocrat. He becomes very, you can say, absolute tyrant. And at this stage in the career of Macbeth, Macbeth still looks upon his wife as a close companion and comrade, though she has now absolutely no hand in his decisions or actions. She is no longer a determining force so far as his actions are concerned, but her role in the action of the play is saving him from a public disclosure. Uh, and Lady Macbeth has hardly any role either in influencing her husband or the action of the play later on. The next time we meet her, she is walking in her sleep and talking to herself. This sleepwalking scene is significant in showing that Lady Macbeth is, after all, essentially a woman with all the weakness of a woman. She is now completely overcome by her sense of guilt, and the scene is important in revealing the psychology of a person who has committed a heinous crime against the voice of her conscience. But all this has little to do with Macbeth, who has now grown into a ruthless tyrant. And in this manner, ultimately, a stage comes when Macbeth has become so hardened that he remains unmoved even by the news of his wife's death. When her death is reported to him, he says, "She should have died hereafter," and goes on to make a comment on the futility of human life in general terms. By now, he is so fed up with life that his wife's death has no effect upon him. But this is a really very, you can say, sorry effect that the lady who has been so strong, who has been so persuasive in all these criminal acts of Macbeth, ultimately loses her grip on Macbeth as well as her own life, simply because the guilt overpowers her, and she says, will the whole waters of oceans can wash her hands, or even the perfumes of Arabia cannot sweeten her hands, which are actually smeared with blood. So, in this manner, Lady Macbeth's character is very central and it is very important in the play. You must study it seriously. Sometimes this question is asked in the examination also. So, you should pay attention to this question very seriously. Thank you very much.